but now I have it where I link it in my email signature. I have people, I've had it happen more than once where someone will make a warm introduction to someone. And when the person that I'm being introduced to responds to the email, they'll say, "Oh, I checked out your podcast. I know so and so. Oh, I checked out your podcast. I know this guest. Oh, I checked out your podcast. I love this episode. Yeah, I want to talk to you whenever you're free." Like it's like this immediate cosign. And again, it could just be because I'm a business podcast, but I really think it translates to any interview-based podcast. Anywhere that you are putting yourself out there to give people a glimpse of who you are, it really kind of acts as this like immediate cosign where people are like, "Oh yeah, she's talking with so and so. Yeah, absolutely. I want to work with this person. Oh, she's talking with my favorite brewery owner. Yeah, I want to, of course, go there every Thursday. She's talking to this James Beard chef in the community. Of course, why wouldn't I want to talk to her? If they're giving her their time, why wouldn't I want to give her my time?" And I think that's such an underrated thing, especially in an era where maybe we're not going out to network in person as much, right? Maybe networking looks different and it is more online. Having that, it's almost like it's as good a Google review, really, and a lot easier to come by, in my opinion, depending on your business.
It is time for Build That Podcast, where we will discuss how you can use a podcast to grow your business and expand your influence. I'm your host, Eric Rutherford. Let me encourage you to sign up for the 200 words to move you forward with marketing and podcasting, delivered right to your inbox each Tuesday. Sign up for it at buildthatpodcast.com/the 200. I'll also put it in the show notes. Now, let's jump into today's episode. And I'm excited today because I have with me Angela Hollowell. She is a full-time creative entrepreneur in the Durham, North Carolina area. She is founder of Rootful Media, which develops purpose-driven creative projects across film, digital, social platforms. And she's also the host of the Honey and Hustle podcast, a video podcast where creative entrepreneurs talk about everything from their biggest wins to their toughest challenges as founders. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric.
Oh, it is my pleasure. Now, before we get into the Honey and Hustle podcast, I would love to hear, how did you get into photography and video storytelling? Because that seems to be part of your story. It's part of your podcast. And were you always interested in stories? I'd just love to hear how that got started.
Yeah. So I started as a photographer in 2015, 2016. Really knew I wanted to do kind of like weddings and events. And as I was growing into my style, I kind of realized that I was gravitating toward this kind of like documentary style approach, right? So less of the super bright, super dark, but really just more naturalistic and focused on the moment and the emotions and things. And as I was growing in that space and just figuring out, okay, what's the best way for me to capture these moments? I was like, well, photography is one way, and I really wanted to explore the options that video offered, right? Because a lot of, at the time, cameras offered the ability to do both. So you could learn, and there was some information on YouTube. And as I started growing, I was like, okay, like I could potentially offer this as a service and be kind of a dual threat. Today's era, then, now, probably in the future, you're going to hear somebody say, find your niche, stick to your niche, do that one thing really well. And that's good. That's not bad advice, but I felt like I could name my price if I could do both photo and video and offer that together instead of, a client having to pay separately for a video, pay separately for photo, and get mixed results. You know what I mean? So that is a big part of my business. That is still what I do to this day for the most part, is documentary films and things. So with me being such a visual person, like the podcast being a video podcast just felt like a natural extension of the work that I was doing. I had already had video equipment. I had some audio equipment, and it has been a learning experience in that, like how to transition from filming someone else to filming me and someone else. But it's been a beautiful journey, and I'm glad that it came the way that it came.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, it is especially today, video is becoming so much more popular, so much more, I almost say needed, just because it feels like so much is gravitating toward video. Having that video podcast, having that video experience, I'm sure makes a pretty significant difference.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I like too the way you realize, hey, I want to be a more of that documentary storyteller. This is more of the what fits with my narrative, the way I tell it. Sometimes just figuring that out can be freeing and just really help. I don't know if that was something you experienced or not, where it's like, hey, I don't have to be everything. I just like this, and I'm gonna focus on this.
Yeah, yeah, especially at the beginning, when you're going from doing it as something as a hobby to doing something for money, you focus so much on, what are the people paying me want, right? Instead of focusing on what type of person am I and how can I offer that to people, right? So they know when they come to me, they're getting me, not just whatever version of me fits what they saw on Instagram, and I think that's a distinction, I think too, you have to recognize, a trend or something fleeting for what it is and really focus on what is really going to stand the test of time, and the thing that's going to stand the test of time is the thing that feels most natural to you.
No, I agree, and I love that. And just listening to your podcast, it definitely has that feel and that narrative tone, which I really liked. And let's just kind of jump into there. So, what is the Honey and Hustle podcast?
So it is an interview style podcast featuring stories from entrepreneurs, mainly from North Carolina, talking about, yes, their journey, a little bit of how they built it, but more importantly, why? Why did you build this? Why, if you could start any business in the world, why this one? Why at the time that you started it? Why have you continued to work in this field? What has been working for you? What are some challenges that you had? What are some things you thought about when you started the business? All the things that probably people every day on the street are thinking about. I have a family, I have kids, I have bills, I have student loan debt, whatever the situation it may be that could hold you back from potentially wanting to do something that is considered risky. And then what are all the things that have paid off for you that worked well for you? Well, now I have more time to spend with my kids. I have more time to spend with family members. I have more time to just take a step back from the grind of every day of working to pay off debt and really working to create a life that I want, that allows me to live freely in whatever way that means to me. So I think, again, entrepreneurship is not all roses. It's not all easy, but it's not all bad either. And I think there's definitely some peace to be had, even if you're not a millionaire.
No, I think that's true. I think there is something to in creating a business, having some autonomy, having some control over where you're going. That is both terrifying and wonderful, all in the same moment. It's like this dual, it's both sides of the same coin. So I love that, how you're focusing on the whole picture of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And when you started it, was that kind of the problem you were trying to solve, and trying to say, hey, I want to learn, but I also want to help everybody see this is what the entrepreneur journey looks like?
Yeah, yeah. Coming from Alabama, really just didn't have access to people who were, one, as vocal as a lot of the people here in North Carolina and willing to share their story. And then just being from more rural area, and even in the city of Birmingham, I mean, just networking events, business leaders coming together on a regular basis, it just wasn't happening. And so I came here and I'm like, wow, I have access to all these people. And not just business owners, but consultants, coaches, people who've had whole careers at companies and left to start their own thing, just people with all different types of journeys. That, yeah, I definitely learned something when I speak to them. But I'm also like, okay, if you have access to the internet, I really don't believe that, your access to mentorship and help and stories should be limited to where you live. And I wanted to kind of fill that gap for people who are early stage entrepreneurs who may not be able to just go out in their community and talk with people freely because they don't have a relationship with them or because they're just not that accessible. And so I wanted to make the podcast something that felt like, yeah, I'm walking into a room, maybe like a casual Friday, a happy hour, slow networking event, and I'm sitting down one to one with this founder. I want them to feel like they're me. They're sitting across from them, and they're getting the chance to have this intimate, relaxed conversation with somebody who's in their shoes that maybe they want to be.
And it is so true. Just helping and building those relationships, that networking makes all the difference. Now, one of the really cool things I like about your show is that it seems like you said, hey, I'm going to focus on entrepreneurship in North Carolina. And just kind of what you shared a little while ago, as I've done some digging, I didn't realize how much of a hotbed North Carolina is. Why say I'm just going to primarily look at North Carolina? Is that because of what you saw around you? I would just love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it was a lot, definitely influenced by my experience moving to the Triangle and just feeling like the world of the entrepreneurial ecosystem really opened up to me, in a way that I just hadn't experienced when I was living in Alabama. And then two, it was also like North Carolina geographically is very interesting, right? I live in the Triangle, what we call the Triangle, which is like also nicknamed the Silicon Valley of the East. So there's definitely a lot of tech, a lot of SaaS, a lot of biotech companies here. There's also a lot of diverse restaurants and things like that that fit a wide range of people. There's, the legacy of Black Wall Street that is here. So a lot of Black entrepreneurs. It's a big brew state. There's a lot of breweries. They're just attracting a lot of business to this area. We have, world-class athletics in UNC Duke. We have, women's soccer. A lot of the people that play women's soccer here in Raleigh are also on the US women's team. So there's a lot there in the triangle. And I'm looking again geographically, a lot of North Carolina has a lot of like big cities, like good medium-sized cities. You have your Greensboro, your Winston-Salem, Asheville in the mountains, Charlotte, very large city, Wilmington on the coast, Fayetteville, North Carolina, also has the biggest amount of Black entrepreneurship in the country. So you're looking at all these things and they all have different kind of ecosystems, right? But they all work together to make North Carolina so unique. And I really wanted to explore that because again, coming from Alabama, there's maybe 4 or 5 big cities, Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, and Montgomery, probably the ones that come to mind for most people. But they're not necessarily known to be entrepreneurial hubs, not in the way that places are here. And again, just resources, the way people pull resources together, the amount of accelerators that are available for small businesses. I just really saw like this different atmosphere and different level of access and kind of catering to the backbone of North Carolina, which is these small businesses. And so I said, there's plenty for us to explore. And I think the makeup of these cities, the different makeup of these cities can relate to anybody in the mountains, Appalachia, to the beach, to the city, to the coast, to your, homey kind of feeling towns like Greensboro. I love that diversity of location here. That's really easy to tap into.
I like that. No, and it really gives the show just a really neat feel. Just with focusing on North Carolina, understanding North Carolina better. I'm in Tennessee, so we are adjacent, but so just learning about the state, I've always thought North Carolina was fascinating, but now understanding even the growth, and I didn't even realize how many medium to large cities were there. But as you start listing them, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a lot there, and it's fascinating. So I love that you are using that as that baseline foundation for your show. Kudos on that because I think it works awesome. When you have conversations with entrepreneurs, how do you help them share their story and their journey? Because I know you talk about having you like that documentary style of filmmaking and other things. How do you help them tell their story?
Yeah, that's actually something that I surprisingly struggled with a lot. And I think part of it was because I was also on camera, so I would get nervous. So it's like, how do you tell somebody, oh, it's fine, like you don't have to be nervous, but you're also nervous and like shaking. So that was me at first. It definitely was a learning curve of like, okay, I need to figure out how I can best prepare so that I can make someone else feel comfortable and relaxed so that we can have fun and it can feel conversational and they can forget that I'm recording them, right? I mean, I definitely had all the classic mess ups. I would straight up forget questions. I would mix up some part of their history. I would start on a thread and just get lost mid question. I mean, I just had all the classic errors and I didn't write down questions. I still don't write down questions. And it wasn't a lack of preparedness. I guess my style as an interviewer, I don't like to be looking down. I like to have eye contact when I'm talking with people. And then again, like, when I was first started filming, I was filming in person. So that was another element of making me nervous because I'm like, I just met this person and now I'm like trying to have this build rapport and like trying to have this in-depth conversation and I'm forgetting their name, I'm pronouncing it wrong, I'm asking them the wrong questions, like, so it's a learning curve. But I would say now, really, the devil is in the details, and the key to a good episode will always be in preparation, right? So even now that I'm filming remotely, I will come in with my research and then I'll say, hey, we're not filming yet. I just wanted to talk to you a little bit. I'll give them a few ground rules and I'll say, I just want to make sure I got this part of your story right. I saw this on your website, or I heard this, or I read this in an article. Is this correct? And just kind of get them used to talking with me and sharing things and things like that. And some other stories will come up. They'll be like, oh man, that's a whole other story. I'm like, we can get into it. It's fine. Absolutely, so really, like, some of it too is about teasing out the things that you really can't learn only through research, right? People are so much more than what we see online. There's so much more than from what we hear, even from recommendations. And I want to give them that opportunity and that latitude to tell the stories they feel are important to them. And so that's a lot of it. A lot of it's listening, it's learning, and it's making people feel comfortable and jogging their memory too about things that they know like the back of their hand, or they got it out of earshot because they're like, oh, I'm through it now. I jumped over that hurdle. I'm there now. But it's sometimes you have to take them back, like, no, take me back to before it was good, like, talk to me about that a little bit.
And it really is, because you can do all the research in the world, but sometimes it's one of those terrifying things. You meet somebody for the first time and it's supposed to look just natural, but we just met 5 minutes ago. So I love that you're talking about building that rapport, just trying to figure it out. And it really is like, I do the same thing. I forget questions. It's repetitions. And the more you do it, the better you get it. But yeah, it's getting comfortable on both sides. I still remember editing some of my early stuff and I hated hearing my own voice. It just made me cringe. I don't know if you've had that, but man, I'm just like, now it's not bad. I've finally gotten used to it, but, and it's a process. As you're talking to these entrepreneurs, and you yourself being an entrepreneur, you experience both of these. What do you see as some commonalities in early stage entrepreneurship? I'm sure you have been able to see the spectrum with all of the conversations you have. So as people are thinking through, maybe they're in business, they're thinking about starting something on their own. Maybe they're doing the entrepreneurial journey, they're founders, and they're thinking, man, I am alone. What are some commonalities there?
Yeah, I would say for a lot of people, starting a business, at least the people that have stuck with it and been with it for a long time, starting a business felt a lot less like something I just want to try. And it really felt like, if I don't do this, a part of me will not be satisfied, right? Like, this is what I'm meant to do. This is what I need to do. Whether or not I know how to do it, irrelevant. I'm willing to figure it out. Whether or not I am financially ready, irrelevant. I will figure it out. And I think that is still to this day the most common thread, is like, no matter what challenges you have, people who start their business, stick with their businesses, are people who truly believe in what they're doing, why they're doing it, and are willing to go through the hard times and the mistakes and the challenges to make it happen. And that's just the reality. And I love that that comes out to some extent in my show, because I think, again, if you're looking online, people will think, oh, you just start a business and it's cute and it's perfect. And 3 months later, you're making $10,000 a month and life is good and you have no more worries. And that's just completely not the case. And another thing is, you're never going to be perfect at every aspect of business, and you don't have to, right? Because as you grow, you'll find the people that are meant to be there to support you and help you and want to, see you. And I think, again, going back to the loneliness thing, that's the easiest thing to forget. You never know who's watching you. You never know who's out there rooting for you. And, I try to encourage people watching the show, listening to the show. If you like something that somebody said, or they said something that means something to you, please tell them. Like, please comment under this, because sometimes you can forget that there's people, like, for every one person that's commenting, there's probably 10 people who are silently like so excited and so grateful, for this information. And I try to think about that too, even on my worst days, on my loneliest days, on my hardest days. I'm like, there's somebody out there that's looking at me online, or in, as they see me in the community, and they're saying like, wow, like, they're really doing great things, and they're really trying their hardest to do right by people. And I think that's so important.
It can feel very lonely just getting that encouragement. I remember, just even as we connected on LinkedIn and you sent me this intro video, and I was like, this is brilliant. Oh my word, this is awesome. And so I'm like, man, you just nailed it with that. And so I'm like, man, I need to create something like that as a bridge point. And I thought that was brilliant. So yeah, and it is. And I like how you talked about not being, you don't have to do it alone. Like, even if you're like entrepreneur, founder, solopreneur, it's not you don't have to do it all yourself. And in fact, yeah, it's better not to, because I have some glaring weak points that I need somebody else to do that, whether it's outsourcing, whether it's just some type of collaboration. So I think we have to do it alone. I don't know if that's been the cases as you have talked with people where they're like, but I just needed to just take care of everything. I'd love to hear if you have some stories on that or your own experience.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you're first starting out, at least if you're like me, you don't have a lot of money to outsource, first of all. So on some level, you do have to kind of like, I gotta figure this sales thing out. I gotta figure this invoicing thing out. I gotta figure out this delivery. I gotta make this smooth. I gotta see how I can slide it and ask for a review. You know what I mean? Like, and I gotta remember this every time I work with someone. You know what I mean? It has to be like this repeatable system. And when you are plugged into a job, you're not thinking about how truly the system was already built for you to succeed, right? You're just the person that goes in there. And it sounds bad. It's not. It's really, that's how it is supposed to work, if we're being honest. But, when you're your own a business owner, you're the one who has to create the system, right? So you're the one who has to think like, is this working? Is this cost effective? Is this repeatable? Is this something that, anybody else I can pass this off to and they can do the same thing. So yeah, I think definitely what helps me again was being able to reach out to people who are also like doing the same thing, and talk to them. I definitely had some talks with my founder friends and we're all like, yeah, we're all struggling. Like it's cool. Like, or yeah, this is something I tried, maybe it'll work for you. You know what I mean? We share tips, we share advice, we share wine, we share, whatever's needed at the time because it's just not all fruits and roses, but it's not all bad either. And it doesn't have to be, and you definitely don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's been one of the fascinating things is just the community of entrepreneurs that you run into, just those conversations. Even just a couple of times this week, I was interviewing some guests for my podcast, and it was like, yeah, it's just neat to have a conversation and just what's going on and what struggles are you going through and how's this working, because it's like, wow, I'm not alone. Other people are doing the same thing. There's some successes, there's some struggles, but we're doing this. It's a journey together. And that was something very unexpected for me in the process, and something to get used to too. I'm like, I'm sort of private. I'm like, I don't network well. In fact, hand sweat just thinking about networking. It's like, ugh. So it's been one of those really cool things. Is also admitting it's good to have some help along the way. Is there like one struggle that entrepreneurs face that you're like, they all face this? Or is there different things? Is there like one thing that you've seen everybody faces in terms of a struggle?
Yeah, the transition into being a leader of sorts. Not all leaders are entrepreneurs, not all entrepreneurs are leaders. But to me, the most successful entrepreneurs know how to lead, even if knowing how to lead themselves, right? I know what I need to do to take care of myself, to show up to work, show up for my clients, and show up for the people that love me. And leadership extends to hiring. It extends to how you communicate with the client, whether you own that process or you kind of let them walk all over you. It extends to, even if you don't have full-time staff, you may have subcontractors that you work with, how you work with them, how you treat them, how you make decisions in the community, whether that's to go out and network or if that's to go out for, mentorship, to mentor someone else, to share your time, talent, and treasures. I think that transition, it can be a struggle because if you're not used to having to juggle all the things, sometimes being a leader means making executive decisions. And I know, especially for me, a lot of people, when you're the founder of the business, and maybe you don't have a co-founder, all the decisions weigh on you, right? And it's up to you to prioritize and make the best decisions to make the business move forward. And that can be daunting, I think, especially again, when maybe you don't have access to people who you can ask, who have been there, who have considered what you're considering. So it can be rough and you just kind of have to trust that you're making the right decision. And if not, you have to eat that. A lot of times financially, there's nobody else making up for your mistakes but you. That weight can be hard.
That's something I've learned too, is like a lot of decisions early on, I would almost beat myself up over making mistakes. And it's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm getting better, but I'm not perfect at it. It's still, but I'm moving in the right direction. But you're right. It is. I think I was surprised by just the sheer number of decisions to make. It's like and it's all encompassing from suppliers to software. I mean, it's just a lot. So I love that you brought that up. One thing too, because you are, as an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, but you are also a podcast host. You have a podcast, building relationships that way. Because, and I know people listening, they could be existing podcast hosts. Their business could already have a podcast. Maybe they're kicking it around and thinking, man, can this help me? Is this good? How do you see your podcast as a way to expand your business and expand your reach? Because I think it can be a great tool to do that. I was just kind of curious how you see that working.
You know, what's funny is that, when I first started the podcast, I didn't think about that at all. It was just a labor of love. It was just something I wanted to do. But now I have it where I link it in my email signature. I've had it happen more than once where someone will make a warm introduction to someone. And when the person that I'm being introduced to responds to the email, they'll say, "Oh, I checked out your podcast. I know so and so. Oh, I checked out your podcast. I know this guest. Oh, I checked out your podcast. I love this episode. Yeah, I want to talk to you whenever you're free, you know?" Like, it's like this immediate cosign. And again, it could just be because I'm a business podcast, but I really think it translates to any interview-based podcast. Anywhere that you are putting yourself out there to give people a glimpse of who you are, it really kind of acts as this like immediate cosign where people are like, "Oh yeah, she's talking with so and so. Yeah, absolutely. I want to work with this person. Oh, she's talking with my favorite brewery owner. Yeah, I want to, of course, go there every Thursday. She's talking to this James Beard chef in the community. Of course, why wouldn't I want to talk to her? If they're giving her their time, why wouldn't I want to give her my time?" And I think that's such an underrated thing, especially in an era where maybe we're not going out to network in person as much, right? Maybe networking looks different and it is more online. Having that, it's almost like it's as good a Google review, really, and a lot easier to come by, in my opinion, depending on your business. So, it's great. And I think that's such an underrated thing. It's when people talk to me and they're saying, "Oh, I don't know if I should start a podcast, and I really want to talk about XYZ." I always try to lean people towards, hey, if you want to do a podcast, if you're not going to jump in and do it completely interview based, I highly suggest you work in some kind of collaboration with somebody else that's either in your industry or that's important to the field that you're in, because it just makes so much sense to get in front of other people's audiences. And especially when it's somebody that you want to be next to, which is also important, choosing your guests wisely. But when it's somebody you want to be associated with, and it can really work out well for you.
That is true. I love how when you started it, you said it was just a labor of love. I get that, because I think podcasting is it's a fascinating medium. I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there is just something about the medium itself, and even having conversations with people, that if that is all I get out of it, it's totally worth it. And so I love too how just that link in your email can make those connections. And as you said, the more episodes you have, the more conversations you have, the more connections you make. And it really is fascinating when people look at, you've got 20 episodes, you've got 25, you've got more, and they're like, "Oh, you talked to so and so." It's that social proof of, oh yeah, it's so much better than, and you're right, it's better than Yelp to really to put yourself out there. So I like that. I'm glad you brought that up. That's brilliant, and I think underappreciated in terms of what a podcast can do for you. Any stories you'd like to share from your experience as that have been surprising, maybe encouraging, whether it's with your podcast or even with just in your freelance, I say freelance, entrepreneurial business. All freelancers are entrepreneurs. And so any that you'd like to share that you're thinking, man, this was just one of those excellent moments.
Yeah, I'll bring it back to the podcast. I really did get more involved on LinkedIn once I started the podcast, because I'm like, wait, I'm starting a business podcast. Most of, the business-minded professional people are going to be on LinkedIn, right? Not to say they aren't on Twitter, but they're probably not talking about business on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like, they're probably talking about who knows what on there, because I am too. But and I do have a Twitter account for the podcast, but it is what drew me to get more involved on LinkedIn and start posting daily on LinkedIn and sharing episodes on LinkedIn. And really, again, like, not just sending requests, but adding that video component, like, and introducing them to myself, my business, the podcast, what have you. And really just the amount of opportunities that the podcast has opened up to me has been unreal. Seeing how it's been like this silent co-signer for my business, incredible. I've gotten speaking opportunities from it. Never saw myself as a speaker, was never trying to use it to angle myself as a speaker. But that is something that has come out of it that I've tried to embrace and also get better at. And two, just the recognition that I have from it and how the show has grown in engagement. There's genuinely people that like look for it every week and like, oh, I love this episode. I love such and such. Oh, I love this point this person made. So they're not just like listening to the first 30 seconds. You know what I mean? They're actually like listening and watching and engaging. And that's so beautiful because there's definitely times when I first started, I was like, nobody's listening to this. Like, why am I even doing all this work? And, you get so discouraged sometimes as a creator. I'm sure I'm not alone in that, but it's been so beautiful. And the peak moment happened probably earlier this month. I was out for a walk on a trail near my apartment, and this woman stopped me. She's like, hey, are you Angela from such and such? And I was like, oh my God, how does this person know me? And I was like, yes. And she's like, oh, we're connected on LinkedIn. And I was like, okay, what's your name? She told me her name. I go home and I look her up. She's somebody that I sent a connection request with the video, but never responded. So imagine how many people have seen this video, know exactly who I am, never respond, have been watching my stuff this whole time, and just aren't saying anything. And so that's crazy to me. I think just the reach and the connections and just the familiarity that it gives people to who you are is just unmatched. And it's so beautiful and sometimes frightening, but beautiful nonetheless.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And it's amazing to me. I'm kind of the same way. I was trying to figure out how to best engage with a business audience. I tinkered with Twitter, LinkedIn. It really kind of took off. It really is an opportunity to build those relationships and your business and everything else. And I love how you were just describing some of the things that the unexpected that came from the podcast and the business itself that you couldn't imagine, but it just takes time to get there. Time that, and the early stages are, well, they're hard, good, but they definitely can be discouraging. So as just kind of we wrap up, any takeaway you would like to leave the audience with who may be thinking about a podcast, have a podcast for their business, any one takeaway?
Yeah, when you're doing something from a place of love, obviously you care deeply about it. You're creating a show, you know the amount of time that it takes to make one episode, let alone 5, let alone 10, let alone 20. So to stay consistent can be hard. To do it when you feel like nobody's watching can be even harder. But, if I'm any proof, sticking with it has proved to me that people are watching, whether or not they're saying anything, whole other story. But people are watching. People are probably enjoying it more than you think, and continue to put yourself out there and put yourself in a place to start conversations, no matter how that is, whatever way feels comfortable for you. And I guarantee you people will start to give you that love back.
I think that's brilliant. And I agree wholeheartedly. And if people want to know more about you, more about your podcast, your work, where would you like them to go?
You can go to heyangela.co, and that'll take them to my website. I'll let them know a little bit about me, the clients that I work with, the projects that I'm working on, that sort of thing.
Excellent. So I will put that in the show notes. Make sure to check out the website, her podcast, her LinkedIn. She has some great content out there. Definitely encourage you to listen to that. As I said, her podcast is wonderful. I've listened to several episodes, and it's just a wonderful story and encouragement to me as I listen. So, Angela, thank you for joining me today. This was just a fun conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Make sure to sign up for the 200 at buildthatpodcast.com/the 200 and receive 200 words every Tuesday to move you forward with marketing and podcasting, delivered right to your inbox. Lastly, if you have questions or comments, you can find me on LinkedIn at Eric Rutherford, DM me on Twitter at rfordej, or email me at eric@straightforwardmg.com. Remember, use podcasts to grow your business and expand your influence.